Yeah, there's a very familiar sound. Now, you don't usually hear it because the GoPro produces it before it starts recording. So you would need another device recording in order to hear it. And Eric here, well, also known as Gunk Climber, rocks 2 cameras on his helmet. And he's probably the only person that's been doing so. Session 4 and a GoPro Fusion. Fortunately for us, he's not too self-conscious about that. One of the more frequent requests I receive is a video where I provide some sort of commentary on what's going on. Now, in recent years, I've made an effort to narrate my exploits live, but Eric hasn't really caught on the idea of doing this. Now, this is fine if there's another actor in the footage and there's some sort of active dialogue between them. You've probably heard that in some of my videos. However, if you're by yourself, the footage tends to be a little dry. And Eric has recently discovered this filming his rope sewing exploits. So we thought we'd use this as an opportunity to experiment a little bit. A few months ago, Eric was up in the Delaware Water Gap and filmed a rope sew of the area classic called Triumvirate. In the interest of providing a little bit more depth to the footage, he asked me if I could provide some sort of commentary of the climb. Now, before we get started, it's worth mentioning I don't really have a lot of experience with rope sewing. My knowledge stems from skills and techniques that have just been passed on through me through first-hand experience. As far as I can tell, there really isn't a whole lot of formal material on the subject, so much of what I'll be explaining in this video is probably explained to me directly from Eric or stuff that I've just sort of figured out by myself. So the climb Eric is on is Triumvirate. It is a classic up in the Delaware Water Gap. 5'4", I believe. 5'4" or 5'5". And looks like much of the climbing up at DWG, it's pretty dirty. At least in my experience with the climbs that I've done up there have been fairly grassy, dirty, but we'll see how this shapes up. It might get better towards the end. Before we get to any other notable events, the anchor system in the beginning of this video, and you can rewind it back and take a look. Eric has a rope tied to a tree. I'm not sure what knot he's using. And then that runs to a bite that has all of the gear that he's not taking up on the climb is attached to that. And then it runs up to a master point where he has a little nest built, and that's serving directly as his anchor. So the rope then runs up to Eric through his self-belay device. Specifically for him, he likes the Wild Country Revo. And there's a number of things you can use as a belay device when you're rope sewing. This is just what Eric prefers. And then from there, the rope runs into a backpack that he's wearing where all the slack is stored. We'll get to the backpack a little bit later.
Not a clove hitch. That is a munter.
The munter hitch is used because it's add friction in the system. What Eric's trying to do is distribute the force of a fall through the whole system as opposed to just on the anchor, which he can do because you don't have to worry about feeding slack up through the entire system as he's climbing, since he's the one belaying himself. Yeah, it is dirty, isn't it? But being a greater Philadelphia area, Delaware Water Gap is accessible. I mean, next best after this for trad climbing is probably the Gunks, which is another, 2 hours from here? Maybe an hour and a half, I'm not sure. So there you can see Eric pulling rope out of his pack. That's in part to feed slack to himself. He still has to pull it through the device. A lot of this happens out of frame. There's a couple points where we're going to be able to point some stuff out. We'll get to that when it happens. Yeah, DWG is also right next to a highway, which is really annoying, but the gunks isn't really that much better, especially when you get motorcycles coming up through that canyon. So, yeah, you can hear the audio dropped out. I think it's going to pop back in here in a minute. Yep, there you go. It's one of the weird things about GoPros. They have like an auto adjust on the gain, and it does weird things from time to time. Most of my editing time is dealing with audio. I mean, if you apply a global filter to try to cancel out that road noise when it's not there, suddenly everything sounds all weird, and sometimes it just kind of like pops in and out depending upon what's going on. You can probably hear when he's clipping stuff on his gear loop how the audio volume will just change. There's some other issues, we'll hear them soon enough, that you have to deal with. Another munter hinge. That's not necessary to do every time. It's just more of a safety thing. Again, it just distributes the load evenly across your whole system. I mean, if you're confident in your anchor, you could just go ahead and clip the rope right in. Or if you just don't have a free hand. There you can see Eric untying a knot that he has tied into the rope. He told me it's like every 15, 20 feet he does that. In that manner, if his belay device fails, then, what? Well, that's interesting. I'm not sure what he did there. The Revo has a little switch on the top of it that is used to open and close it, but I don't think he hit that. He did hit something, though. I'm not sure what. I'll have to ask him. Oh, man. Probably heard that knock. Those things drive me nuts. There's another one. Really any sort of brush against, well, knocking the camera against rock or dragging it through brush. I mean, I will, or that. See, I think that knock there, and right there, it's just some sort of artifact or something's moving inside the helmet. My current helmet has gotten really bad. In fact, I think it's become pretty much unusable with cameras. But yeah, most of my editing time is editing audio. I will go through an audio file and individually filter out each of those little knocks. I've had plenty of recommendations on filters to do that globally, but I haven't found an effective one yet. At least one that kind of meets my standards. Maybe I'm just being too particular or sensitive about it. Ugh. That stuff. grass on this thing. Jeez. That is smart. Yeah, if you go back and look at, what was the climb called? Yesterday's. It's a recent video, or a more recent video I produced. I had an incident where I did not do that and grabbed a loose block, and fortunately it didn't pop out, but man, if it would have, that would have been a pretty nasty fall. But especially in areas where you have a lot of growth like this, I mean, it just allows moisture to get in there, and then freezing, thawing, thermal expansion, it just pulls these rocks loose. There is a way to tie a munter hitch with one hand, by the way. It's not hard to learn. Generally, if you're leading, though, if you have a belayer, then there's not usually a need to do it one-handed, but I suppose in the case of rope soloing, it would be a good skill to learn. We'll find out what that rope's all about a little bit later. Oh, you hear that? It's a little underwater knocking. It's something in the shifting in the helmet that he's wearing. I've done so much to try to eliminate that, and I've never been successful in fully getting rid of it. I like to edit stuff like that out. Especially when you're trad climbing, you'll be sitting there just trying to figure out what you're going to do next. You know, you're just standing in or in a comfortable position and you're just staring into space. There's more of those weird noises. Yeah, if you're ever really looking for raw footage, Eric keeps it about as raw as it gets. It's pretty much from the time what he gets when he pushes the button to start recording to the moment he pushes the button to stop recording. That is exactly what you'll see. All the waiting and everything else. Little wind noise. I'm looking at getting a sock for mine. Though I might be changing GoPros pretty soon. 5's getting pretty beat. Also starting to run issues with battery life. Yeah, that thing looks bomber. Yeah, you could just let the rest of your slack lie on the ground or at the start of the pitch. Though I imagine that would really drag through the device as you're climbing. So feeding it through the device would be more of an issue. With the backpack, at least you're carrying it with you. It's just you got to carry a backpack while you're climbing. Huh.
Might need this.
Oh, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, it's one of the advantages of tripling your rack, tripling your rack is can be a little bit more liberal in the amount of pro that you place. You just got to carry it around. I've started to go more towards a single rack and just get creative. Good times. Though I suppose if you don't have any interest in being too stressed, then double rack is probably a good idea. Probably safer. Though I've had people argue with me that extending gear is not safe because you're tiring yourself out. I suppose you could use the same logic towards racking up more pro, which doesn't make sense to me. I don't know where that dialogue would go. Looks pretty comfortable. Which is a good thing, because you got someone ahead of you might have to wait for. Good. And here's that piece he cleaned, I think. It looks about the same size. No, he's something different. I think he used a master cam before. It's a power cam. Just having trouble placing.
Yeah, a little overcammed, but...
Well, overcam's not bad. It'll stay in on a fall, just might not be able to get back out. Might not be able to get back out if you don't fall it, but it'll work.
Oh, that looks awesome.
It looks kind of cool. I don't know if he's climbing that face or not, but rope in the way. Yeah, we'll see what's going on with that in a minute. And it can be avoided, though. Well, we'll see what's going on with that in a minute. Yeah, like waiting around like this is stuff I try to edit out. Yeah, I mean, people are watching this stuff. In my opinion, people are watching it for the climbing, you know, and the experience. Waiting around isn't much of an experience. Can be if you have the right dialogue or a good view, no doubt. I've been staying with a guy that says that a lot, so now I'm kind of self-conscious whenever I use the phrase. So he's probably extending this piece out of habit, which normally not a bad thing. I know some people argue with me on that. But ironically, when you're rope sawing, it's not really necessary. I mean, we're not feeding rope through the system. You're belaying yourself. So, yeah, there really isn't a necessity in extending gear like that, other than maybe you're concerned about the piece walking, and which is extending your pro will help avoid that. There's the party to the right of him, and that is the source of that rope. So my guess is that they're tagging a line to aid with rappelling, and that's fine. Though if you do that when you finish the climbing, or in which case they have, because this is the belayer that line is tagged off of, just pull the rope up, and that way people that are climbing below you don't have to deal with it, or it's out of their way. It's just more of a courtesy than anything else.
Jamie! Yo! Give me a little slack so I can move the rope!
On a positive note, he cited his partner's name before he communicated with him. That's a good thing.
Yep, overcammed again.
Well, again, overcammed isn't a bad thing from a safety perspective, especially in this case because that crack looks a little flared. But, you know, to be fair, we're looking at that placement through a field of view of, what, like 115 degrees? I'm not sure exactly, but it's distorted enough that you can't tell for sure. Just trust me when I say that, but I'll tell you what, the best way to see that for yourself is to wait until Eric releases the fusion footage of this video, because he releases that in the 360 degree, or the VR mode, and that has a more natural field of view. Yeah, that isn't to say that it might have been flared, or a poor place to put a piece of pro, but hey, you know what, in the moment, you have to give the climber credit. I mean, they're just doing what they can when they're in a situation when you are experiencing a degree of tunnel vision. You know, even in Eric's case here, he's pretty comfortable in doing something well below his limit. But you still experience a degree of that. Pulling that rope out of the pack. Audio gain changes drastically. This is pretty cool. The climbing, that is. Just sort of traversing out over this little buttress, nice and exposed. Pretty no. That looks awesome. Oh, I guess it wasn't. Again, you can't tell from the camera. It can be misleading. Actually, I think that's... I'm not sure. That was an orange piece, and he changed it to a red. So yeah, I guess he went up in size. Yeah, if you've watched my videos, you probably know I use black diamond and totems. So the color coding on Metolius I'm not totally familiar with. I think the orange is equivalent to like a 0.4 or 0.5, 0.4 I think, and the red would be like a 0.5. There you can see Eric untying that knot, by the way.
Meters now.
Again, when he releases the 360 degree footage, or the fusion footage, you'll be able to actually look around and see him pull the rope out of his pack and untie the knots and whatnot. This is cool.
Off belay, Steve. Off belay. Okay, you're off belay, Steve.
Include the name with the communication. It's a good thing to hear.
Hang on.
Especially nowadays when crags get as crowded as they do, it's a really good idea to cite your partner's name, preferably before you communicate, but even in that case afterwards, he at least cite his partner's name. Because otherwise you have people yelling out off belay, and then the wrong belayer takes their partner off belay, and I have heard way too many instances of that. And yeah, I mean, it's a safety thing. It's also a courtesy. Communicate your partner's name if you can. I mean, obviously, if you're stressed and you just want to yell out something, go for it. No one's going to fault you for that. Hopefully it won't. There you can see him struggling to pull the right rope through his device. Yeah, he's used a few devices for rope soloing. The Revo, Wild Country Revo, which is what he's using right now, that's just his preferred device.
That's me, Steve.
I think he had an instance where the click up failed on him, though I haven't seen that. I know he's used gree-grees. The only rope soloing I've ever done was with the gree-gree. Works fine. It's just a pain in the butt to actually feed through the device as you're climbing. But the gree-gree wasn't made for rope soloing. Actually, I don't think any of these devices are really made specifically for rope soloing. There was a device called the Soloist, but they don't make it anymore. Not sure a lot of climbing companies want to dabble in that.
Okay.
Might be also one of the reasons why there's not a whole lot of literature on the subject. Good view. Good view of the climb, that is.
How's it going?
Wait, did I see that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this guy has a locker clipped into a draw.
I see my
sort of negates the point of the locker. But hey, you know what?
Because
at least the guy is
down there. I'm like tied off
tied in. And with the button press, Skunk Climber's video comes to an end. So since he doesn't usually provide credits, I'll provide it for him. If you enjoy rope soloing, or point of view climbing, POV climbing, just in general, Skunk Climber is probably the single most prolific YouTuber producing it, and I would highly recommend his channel. He was also just recently interviewed by another friend of mine, Corey Constable, who accompanied him up to the Gunks recently. Corey chose to document this adventure, and I'll provide a link to that video and his channel in the description for this video. Now listen, this video proved to be far more work than I was expecting. But if you really enjoy it, let me know in the comments. I have no qualms making more. If you feel really strongly about it, if you'd like to see me do something slightly different or see more of this, just let me know. You can plug it in the comments, you can provide me an email, you can get a hold of me via social media. Be safe, guys. Have fun. Stay strong over this winter. I have a feeling it's going to be a long one. Take care.